Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of Open World Chat. One that's going to be interesting and complicated, I think. And I'm John Odom. I'm here with my complicated co-host, Mark Card. Mark, how you
Wow,
doing?
that's an accurate description. Um, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, John, because we started this conversation as kind of I don't know, is this a topic? Will this work? Will it not work? And I think both you and I, as we started digging into it separately, individually, figured out that it's a real thing. I mean, this is a really interesting thing. So I hope we'll be provocative too, because
Yeah, and what we're going to talk about is, we had the episode before sci-fi movies that didn't know they were sci-fi. Now we're doing the same trick with horror, but horror turns out to be such a different ball game. Sci-fi, and this sounds like a knock against it, but we defined it in a couple sentences here and there. What is the sci-fi genre? The problem with what makes this one so different is you can't necessarily do that with horror, or at least there's a couple really different ways you can go. Neither of them is necessarily a good fit. So I don't know if you ran into the same problem I did, but I ran into a lot of movies that, well, some I think you can say, yeah, definitely, but some that were maybe. There's a fuzz. There's a gray area with when you're talking horror as a genre.
well, that's true. And I think there's a couple things at play here. One is more than a lot of movies, I think people have a general understanding of what science fiction is.
Hmm.
But I think horror is fairly subjective. You know, uh, you show somebody a picture or a video of people bungee jumping, and it scares the hell out of them.
Hmm.
The next person you show a video of bungee jumpers, and they want to do that. They want to run out and do that today.
Hmm.
And so I think horror is one of those things that, it works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. Horror movies, when I was a kid, I was scared of them. Once I hit my teen years, I laughed at them because in a
Right.
lot of horror movies, uh, they almost, well, in a big number of horror movies, they fail the Roger Ebert idiot plot. And the Roger Ebert idiot plot is if one person in the movie, one character in the movie, stops acting like an idiot, the movie's over. But what's interesting to me is when I was prepping for this, I found that there are a lot of these. And that's because human horror has so many different iterations. People are scared to death literally of almost anything. And I think that adds to the gray area that we're talking about here.
That's
But
interesting too, because I was finding that a lot of it depends on what era you're looking at and what the word horror means, because it means very different things cinematically depending on what decade you're in.
right, right. So this is going to be a good one. I'm going to get into this one. So
Hmm.
can I go first?
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely want to take some time as we go to work on defining the genre because
Yeah,
that's a challenge. It's a challenge.
it is a challenge, but that's also, I think, why we have so many examples of this.
Hmm.
So my first choice for this, and as soon as I proposed this category to you, I was like, okay, where's a movie that fits? What's a movie that's a horror movie, but it's not marketed as a horror movie, it's not taken as a horror movie, but there's definitely a horror element here, and that's the movie Black Swan. Darren Aronofsky, uh, um, um, Natalie Portman plays a prima ballerina who has already replaced the former prima ballerina in a company, played brilliantly by Winona Ryder. Uh, and she meets another dancer in the company who's new, played by Mila Kunis.
Hmm.
And basically, in the drama of competition and also attraction to Mila Kunis, Mila Portman, that's a good one. Uh, Natalie Portman slowly kind of unravels. And we're not talking about just career wise, we're talking about mentally, emotionally, uh, and physically unravels and slowly doesn't know whether or not, spoiler alert, Mila Kunis actually exists, or if Mila Kunis is a figment of her paranoid imagination in the competition with other dancers to keep this title of prima ballerina. And so I think there are a lot of different kinds of fears in this movie. One is the fear of aging, the
Mm.
fear of getting older. Being a prima ballerina is a really, really physically strenuous job, and you literally wear your body out to get to this point.
Mm.
Um, People don't realize this, but if you think boxers and basketball players and gymnasts are in good shape, try being a ballerina. They have to have the endurance of long distance runners, the flexibility of gymnasts, the artistic capabilities of just about any kind of elite artist. And as you age, your retirement is guaranteed. There may be injury as you age. There may be younger, better dancers who come in as you age. Uh, and so there's a lot of fear going on here. There's a lot of, oh my God, is this person who's really good at this a threat to me, or are we going to become friends? What's going to happen in the rivalry? Will there be a rivalry, or will I dominate the company I'm in? So there's a lot of fear of aging here because once you get to a certain point, your body's not going to be able to do this.
Right. Yeah.
That's just one type of fear. The other type of fear is, of course, a decline in skill. When you're at the top of your game, there's only one direction you can go,
Mm.
and that's downhill. And a dancer who is younger, more capable, has better endurance, has easier recovery times from injury, that's going to threaten your career too. And these people spend, they start at 3 years old and they retire at 35, and their entire lives are dance, dance, dance. How do we keep in shape? How do we prevent injury? How do we increase our skill? How do we increase our creativity? So that's going on. There's another horror going on here, and that's replacement.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to me if I get replaced? What happens to me? Because I mean, what do people who are in this career do when their careers are over? It's not like they can start a clothing line very easily, or a
Mhm.
makeup line, or any of the other kinds of careers that you might go into uh, once you leave celebrity, once you leave an artistic career. So, and you see these kind of horrors develop throughout the movie. She gets more and more frightened of what's going to happen here, and it starts to seep into her sense of reality. Is Mila Kunis a real person? Is she really, or is she an embodiment of your horror? Is she an embodiment of your absolute dread of what happens next?
Mhm.
And her sanity starts to go. And as they move more and more and more toward a performance that they've been working on, she becomes less and less and less tied to reality. And so things happen, you don't know if they're happening. And boy, this is the thing that made me think it's a horror movie. There's a scene where
I
have you
know
seen the
which
movie?
scene. Go ahead.
There's a scene where Natalie Portman finds that she has a snag in her nail.
Oh, that one. Okay.
And so she pulls at the cuticle and it goes about halfway down her finger.
Yeah,
So
body
she's,
horror. Yeah.
yeah. And so this is a body horror thing, but it's all related to the things that I was talking about. Am I going to be able to dance with this horrible injury to my finger? Does this mean I'm going to get replaced? Why can't I recover from this injury? And then, of course, that injury completely disappears in the course of the movie. It's not there at all. So
Yeah.
did it happen? Or is it just a manifestation of her fears? And once you put yourself in her perspective, This is horror. This is not a drama about two competing ballerinas who might have some kind of romantic interest. This is a real horror movie. This is her placing all her fears into this situation, and it affects her sanity.
I love this movie. It's probably on my short list of my favorite movies. It's worth mentioning that we're not the only ones who loved it. It was nominated for a bunch of awards, and I think the only one it won was Natalie Portman won for Best Actress, and it was
Mhm.
very deserved. Yeah, and I mean, Aronofsky has an interesting history with sort of flirting with horror. And is this horror or not? I mean, going back to Pi, which
Yeah.
I guess I used to call it math horror, and I guess it is horror. I guess that one's not. I would say that one more knows what it is. But anyways, he's got an interesting eye for horror. You know, I'm gonna have a hard time with this conversation because there's about 3 million things that come to mind when I think about horror, and I'm gonna want to say them all the time at once about every movie. I'm gonna try to sprinkle them out a little bit, but maybe one of them, just to introduce one that I had identified. Horror as a term was out in the 50s and the early 60s, especially early 60s, where the term was used for, Hammer films, for,
Right.
things like that, even though the elements of horror were still in place all over the place. It's just that you swapped off, you know, here, I didn't think of this just right now. I thought of it earlier today, thinking about it. He swapped off Ouija boards for Geiger counters. Ha, that's pretty good.
Well, and
But
I think that's a completely valid perspective here. I think that shows the strength of our idea here, because
so, yeah, yeah.
because we're kids who grew up in the 60s and 70s. And I don't know about you, did you do duck and cover drills for nuclear war?
No, we did them for tornadoes.
We did them for both
Oh, we didn't
because
do them.
I lived with it. When I was a kid, I lived about a mile as the crow flies from a strategic from a strategic air command base.
Hmm.
Literally, planes from this Air Force base, Kozel Air Force Base, flew and patrolled around the Russian border in the Arctic Sea
Hmm.
with nuclear weapons in the bombers.
Hmm.
So we knew, because my father worked in the defense industry, we knew that Fort Worth was a target for nuclear strike. And my father had actual conversations with us at the table about what to do and where to go in case of this kind of potential problem.
Wow, that's so freaky. No,
So,
I missed that by just a few years. Yeah. Oh,
so
man.
talking about this kind of thing, Geiger counters being horror, and what are the environmental effects of radiation, Godzilla. So that's a legitimate thing here we're talking about. You move away from monster horror movies and supernatural horror to, oh my God, we could be melted anytime, any place.
Yeah. Now, I think that lasts for a while, and there's what I'm going to get to. But this 50s horror also had the monsters, as you say. And there is a difference between monster movies and horror movies, but there's also an overlap. Um, so when I thought of an example of a movie that doesn't know it's horror, I bounced around a lot from this era. I wanted one from this era.
Oh yeah, of course.
But some of them have been retroactively adopted by the horror crowd, so I didn't want to take those. Like I thought about Village of the Damned, which was packaged as incredibly scary. So it was packaged as everything but horror, but again, you couldn't use that word horror. You niche yourself out of existence.
Right.
But it has been retroactively claimed. Um, so I went with Forbidden Planet.
I think that's a great example.
Forbidden Planet has elements of what we think of as horror. And first of all, it does have a monster, but it's a creepy, untouchable, unseeable monster. You don't know where it is, it's lurking, and it's psychological. It's the monster from the id. And the invisibility, the mystery of it, the sort of existential dread, the what is going to happen next. And I think that gets us into you think about elements of horror, there's a couple ways you can think about them. You can think of them as plot elements.
Hmm.
And that's stuff like, there's the Ouija boards, right? There's the supernatural. There's
Hmm.
maybe the slasher, although that's problematic, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But if you go that route, and most people do, then you leave out sci-fi horror, and you leave out a movie like Forbidden Planet, or even some movies that are unquestionably horror, that know they're horror.
Like Alien.
Like Alien, the one I was just about to say. Absolutely. So you have to look for this existential dread. You have to look for the lack of control. You have to look for the unease. And you have to look sometimes for not being left in the greatest place when you're done. And
And
that
I think,
opens up a lot of stuff.
well, I think we just strengthen the hypothesis with Black Swan. Black
Yeah.
Swan is all of those things.
Yeah, definitely.
It is all of those things. There's this existential dread. Am I going to be replaced in a very quick way or a very short way? I mean, or a very long way? Is it going to take a long time to replace me? Or am I going to, break an ankle and then I'm done? And
Well,
so,
I would say the existential dread is insanity. I
oh, I
think
think so
the
too.
whole
Yeah.
question of where is the sanity, what's sanity, where's reality, I think that's an even more fundamental existential thread going on in that movie, and it's really pervasive.
It's everywhere. So, I just think it's important to understand horror in a greater context within the issues in the movie, within the kinds of things that unfold in the movie. And
Mhm.
I think this goes again back to the fact that we're scared of everything around here. I mean, fear is a fundamental part of the human condition.
Mhm.
And there are lots of movies about fear, but there's a difference between, I think, fear and horror.
Yes.
Horror is fear on steroids, literally. You can be afraid of having to drive to the grocery store, but when that fear of driving to the grocery store or dealing with people means you are stuck in a room wearing Kleenex boxes as shoes and collecting your urine and not cutting your fingernails,
Mm.
that's a whole different element of fear. And so I think degree of fear becomes really important when you're looking for movies which are horror movies but don't know they're horror movies.
Yeah.
I think the fear has to be really intense and concentrated, whether that fear is valid or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's another one you got?
I'm going to talk about a movie which is from the 60s, and it's one I saw in college, and this is a movie that has grown out of its well, maybe not. I was going to say grown out of its acceptability in the modern age, but maybe not. And it's kind of an obscure art house film called Death in Venice.
I've
Um,
heard of Death in Venice,
it's
but I
it's
don't know it.
based on a short story by, I think, Thomas Mann, the German writer,
Yeah.
and it's kind of an aging. I don't. I think it's kind of hard to explain it any other way. It's kind of an aging man who has an obsession, a sexual obsession with teenage boys.
Hmm.
And he goes to Venice, and a cholera outbreak occurs. And slowly, basically, you see everyone dying around him. And he gets obsessed with someone that's in Venice sexually. And so, we're talking about pedophilia here.
Yeah.
And slowly, what happens is that he knows he's going to die of cholera, and that's how the movie, that's the whole point of the movie. So gradually, and you get into some symbolism here. What we're talking about is fear of disease. Nobody wants to die by cholera. It's a terrible way to die.
Right.
Uh, I don't want to get graphic here, but basically, you begin to lose all your fluids from whatever point you can use. You can lose fluids. It's rapid. It's debilitating. It's a real body horror. And so you got the fear of disease, but you also have this guy is older in the movies. He's in his 60s or 70s, and he's starting to realize he's no longer sexually attractive at this age.
Hmm.
People just don't view him as sexually attractive. And he's desperately trying to hang on to this attractiveness, this attraction to other people. It's about losing your youth. And let's talk about existential dread. This is literal existential dread. He's old, he's no longer attractive, and you've got this creeping death waiting for him in the form of cholera. When will he get it? When is he going to die? Will he linger a long time? And so the short story and the movie are kind of they're not, it's not even metaphorical. Uh, it's a direct translation of the fear of youth, the desperate attempt to hang on to that youth and the sexual attraction that goes with it, but also survival.
Hmm.
You want to survive here. You want to be able to keep your vigor. And if you can't do that, you want to get through this epidemic. You want to get through this bout of disease. And so he gradually begins to realize that it's hopeless. He is going to die. He does have to deal with that fact, and it's just waiting around the corner for him. I mean, he's literally being stalked by cholera. So again, we get into this magnitude of fear where if you're not thinking of this as a horror movie, it's just, the decline of an aging perv who's about to die.
Right.
But when you think about what his perspective is, he's terrified at every turn, and there's nothing he can do about it. This is coming for you. This is the reward for being mortal. You get to die. And so and you get the idea that his past was glorious and he had lots of great loves. Never mind, they were all, 14 to 16 years old. And he doesn't want any of this to go away. He
Hmm.
doesn't want it to slip. And I think to some degree, this movie is about how terrible society can be for allowing this stuff to go on.
Hmm.
And so it's a complicated movie. It has a lot of interesting themes, but I mean, it's considered an art house cinema classic.
Uh-huh.
And we watched it when I was an undergraduate, and I guess it was for an English course. Yeah, I think it was for an English course. We were talking about the modern European novel, and it's kind of a novella. And then we watched the film for that. And boy, I can remember being, 20, 21 years old and going, oh my God, this movie is so creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, just the main character is this super creepy guy. And, but in the end, he turns out to be humanized in that we all have that creeping death coming for us. And really, we don't know if when it's coming or where it's coming. So he kind of has an advantage.
You know,
He
you,
knows what's going to happen because the city ends up getting quarantined.
Mhm.
So he cannot leave. So at this point, it's between him and his immune system, and he's in his late 60s, early 70s. So the immune system's not necessarily on his side.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the few types of film genre, I mean, examples of the film genre I'm going to tell you about that I really enjoyed.
Mhm.
And this is my least favorite kind of film, and that's a tone film.
Tone film?
Yes. So a great example of a tone film is Picnic at Hanging Rock. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah,
The Australian movie about the little girls who disappear on a school trip.
sure. Yeah.
That's a tone film. There's not a lot going on in that movie during most of it. At the end, there's this frantic search for the little girls, but it's mainly about the tone the film sets visually. The
Well, some
tone.
people would just call that a slow burn.
Now, there's a difference here, and I'll give you an example of one of those, and that is the most recent iteration of Nosferatu.
Hmm.
That's a tone film. You've got all of the sets are creepy. All of them are super dark. All of them are taking place in rain. Even it's like the movie Seven. Even the scenes which occur in broad daylight, the tones are all muted. In this particular case, I'm talking about literal tones.
Okay, so your
It's
complaint
it's an
here,
atmospheric movie.
Well, yeah, but atmosphere is obviously critical to a lot of genres, especially horror. But you're
Yes.
you're objecting to movies where that's it. That's the beginning and the end of it.
Yeah,
Sounds like.
where that's the main point of the movie.
Uh-huh.
It's like how many different shades of gray can we put in this movie?
Right.
And not just gray in terms of visual sense, but gray in terms of moral or metaphorical sense.
Not tone is an element of the movie, but tone is the
As
sort of
the purpose
entirety
of the
of the
movie.
movie. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll
All
tell you
right.
one that succeeds incredibly, and that's the same guy. I forget the director's name, but have you seen The Witch?
Oh, yes. I love
That
it.
that movie completely succeeds as
Oh,
a
good.
tone
I
film.
thought you were going to bash The Witch. I was going to have to
No, 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 no.
disagree
That
with it.
I saw that movie with my niece, who was an English major at the time, specializing in 17th century English literature in the colonies.
Mhm.
And a lot of the dialogue that movie came directly from court transcripts in the 1600s in witch trials. Now, that movie is a brilliant example of a tone film. But
Yeah.
in general, I don't like those kinds of films because I like movies that tell stories in a different way.
it's interesting that you bring up an art house movie because to this day, even though horror is much more of an acceptable term now, where you could argue we're in the golden age of horror here, and we have been for the last 10, 15 years, if not longer. But art house still rejects that. I'm thinking of movies like Killing of a Sacred Deer, things like that, where they will just not use that term. So it's interesting. I'm glad that you picked one because that's very cool. The other thing that's an element, and I'm going to cheat here and throw a couple at you, and they weren't ones. One wasn't even necessarily one I was going to use, but you brought up disease,
Uh-huh.
and disease is such a common element of horror. I mean, going back to, the zombie films, to Rabid, to, all kinds of things.
I just lost
Um,
your video.
you lost my video?
Yeah,
Oh, that's all right. My camera hasn't been working. It's probably just as well,
no
as long as you
worries.
can still hear me.
I
Uh,
can hear you. Sorry about that.
oh, that's all right. So one I'm going to bring up, and then I'll bring up another one to see what you think, is Andromeda Strain. I think that's a horror movie that doesn't know it's horror. It thinks it's not just sci-fi, but pure sci-fi, and it is. It's one of the most hard sci-fi movies you will ever find. But I think it's sci-fi horror, and I think that existential dread of this unknowable illness. What is it doing? Well, we know where it comes from. It comes from other, comes from elsewhere. It's nothing that I mean, you could just about call it supernatural, except that it literally is not. And
Well, let me go back to Isaac Asimov. Any sufficiently advanced technology is the same thing as magic. And so a virus that comes from uh, outer space, that is supernatural. I mean, it's literally not because, the entire universe is part of the natural world. But in terms of human perception, holy crap. I mean,
it doesn't,
if you think we panicked in this pandemic, then imagine if it came from outer space.
sci-fi really likes to, I mean, it's fundamental to it that it ignores that, even though it's interesting that Asimov said that. But here it is. It can't escape it. It can't escape the horror elements, not just inherent in disease fiction, but in this particular one because of the nature of the disease. And
Well,
it does end with a bit of a feeling of lack of control of this could happen again, or it could have gone another way. We lucked out. I think it's a good example. And then the other one I was going to throw at you to get your opinion, because I have a couple that I think are sketchy, because
sure.
I don't think it can just be about something that scares you.
Oh,
I
no, I
think
don't
it
think
has
so
to
either.
be more than that. And the other one I was going to throw at you, which is the other disease one, is the day after, where radiation sickness is the disease. That feels sketchier to me, and I'm not sure why. What do you think of that?
No, I think it's because we know its source. I think it's because we know it comes from nuclear war, and nuclear war is a series of choices.
Well, we know cholera too. We know everything about cholera. We know much more about cholera than we do radiation sickness, which still
Right.
is
But but
creepy.
but I think cholera is less. Okay, let me put it this way. I bet most people don't know where cholera comes from. I
Bad
bet they
water.
don't know that it's contamination of the water,
Yeah.
which results in the generation of the bacteria which causes cholera. I bet
Mhm.
most people don't know that, right?
Mhm.
And everybody knows more or less what the effects of radiation poisoning are. Why? Well, mostly because of movies like this.
Think though, see, I would still say the other way around. I would still say radiation is the one that has the mystery about it. The we just don't understand it, the lurking power. So I don't know that I would. I think I see it as a mirror image. And just for folks who don't know, the day after, sorry, the
Yeah.
day after was a made-for-TV movie around 79, 80, something like that by Nicholas
Oh, it
Meyer.
was 82 or 83.
Oh, was that late? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Um, anyway, Nicholas Meyer of Time After Time and Wrath of Khan fame, if I'm not mistaken. I would hate to be mistaken, but I think that's correct. And it just imagines the immediate aftermath in the Midwest of a nuclear war. And its companion film was Threads in the UK, which is a little more, I think, blatantly easy to call it horror. But the day after, yeah, I was curious what you'd think about that because it strikes me as a borderline one.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that is a borderline horror
Mhm.
film. But again, I don't know. I'm not sure because we're talking about creeping dread. I mean, the early 80s, by the way, I looked it up. It's 83.
Oh, it's much later than I thought. I thought I
Yeah.
was in middle school when it came out.
It was the
Totally.
fall of my senior year.
Okay.
And there was a real palpable fear of nuclear war. I mean, this is the year Ronald Reagan, before an interview with, or no, I'm sorry, before his Sunday radio address, in a test of the equipment, made a fake announcement that we had launched nuclear weapons against Russia. Um, just as a joke, with the mechanical or the technical warm up to the broadcast.
That's right. I
Um,
remember the bad Reagan impression they had in that movie now. Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was a real thing that people feared. There were anti-nuclear protests. There, people were worried about nuclear war with Reagan in office, and
Yeah.
so I think there's a creeping dread here. I think there's an existential threat in this movie, and I think that many people saw that out of their control because you're talking about government. But I do think it's a difficult case. I'm not sure whether or not that works. But I do want to mention a link to real horror. Well, real horror, but movies which are more explicitly horror, and it puts together both The Day After and the Andromeda Strain, and that is there's a real fear of the effects of technology, and I think there are movies, and one just popped into my head. I think a movie we've talked about previously, which um, is now increasingly difficult to find for free, is AI.
Hmm.
And the movie I'm talking about, of course, is Colossus the Forbin Project, which it's like everybody's all of a sudden just very suddenly on the internet went, oh yeah, there's this movie called Colossus the Forbin Project, which
Hmm.
is really relevant now because of AI. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's 55 years old.
Well, you know where I went when you said AI. I went straight to Ex Machina.
Yeah, of course, of course.
That it's which just shows the time frame, the time range between these movies. This has been something that's been creeping the hell out of us for a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah. And who knows, maybe rightfully so. But the
Mhm.
point is that there is a link between the kind of movies that we talk about not knowing they're a horror movie and more traditional horror movies. And I think you bring this up in the last two examples you talked about.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, you probably have
So,
one on your mind, and then I want to hit a different theme, unless you hit it in your next one before me. I may have to double up on you again the next one.
I want to talk about fear of isolation.
Fear of isolation. I
Uh,
know of its existence, but you're picking movies I don't know, which is
and no, this is
very
not a
interesting.
movie. It's not a movie. That's a kind of fear that I want to talk about. This is the
Oh,
entry.
that's a kind of movie.
Yeah,
I
this
thought you
is
were
this.
naming a film.
No, 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 no.
I I
I can
thought,
see why.
God,
That
that
does sound
sounds
like an art
really
house.
familiar.
That does sound like an art house movie. Everybody's heard of this movie. It's a Tom Hanks movie, and I think it's a fear of both alienation and isolation, and that is Castaway.
Huh. That's
This
a horror
movie,
movie.
this
Interesting.
movie is a horror movie. It is fundamentally about lacking connection to society, dying alone, being alienated from society, even if you survive. All of those things are here. It's about a fear of human interaction. It's about a fear of, as I said, survival. And it's about existential dread. You are on a desert island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's an uninhabited island, so people don't know where you are. You and your wits and sheer dumb luck are the only thing between you and sudden death. And the character knows that the only way he's going to survive is to create some kind of artificial connection to someone else, or at least a metaphorical stand-in for someone else, or in this case, a literal stand-in for someone else, Wilson.
Right.
This is a
He's
horror
creepy.
movie because death is creeping around the corner at you, and it could come from anything. You could get a cut on your knee and die from infection. You could, your source of water may be seasonal, fresh water, may be seasonal. This is the big thing that you have to have if you're stranded on a desert island, and that's fresh water because you're not going to be able to survive on seawater. Um, There's a fear of losing your sanity because you don't have a connection to other people. This is a horror movie. This is an existential horror movie. This is a survival horror movie. This is a lack of communication, lack of companionship, dying of loneliness, or even worse, going insane from loneliness kind of movie. And I think there are a lot of movies like this. I think any prison film where the person who ends up in solitary confinement for a long time. Uh, Movies about the prisoners of war in Vietnam. Uh, I
Yeah.
think Castaway is a horror film because once you put yourself in the perspective of someone who is facing giant obstacles to survival, that's pure horror. And whether or not you survive is going to be directly related to how well you can keep your sanity in place. And I just thought of another great example of this, which is a pure science fiction movie, but it's still a horror film and doesn't know it. And that's The Martian.
Interesting.
Matt Damon.
Yeah, it's pretty pure sci-fi, that's for sure.
No, that's a horror movie. Because
Interesting.
what do you do if, I mean, the whole reason why he's stuck is there was an accident.
I might push back a little because the whole movie is actually about what do you do, and he does it. You know what I mean?
Of course,
None of the what do you do is, I mean, I think part of the key part of the movie is the what do you do is all reachable. It's all tangible and it's all overcomable. So that
right.
might not make it a horror movie to
But but
me.
but what does it rely on? What do all these tangible and reachable things rely on?
Human,
You
um,
putting out of your mind what the giant obstacles are. Because, in any one of those things, something small could have gone wrong. So you have to master your rationality. And that's easier if you're a scientist, but not necessarily. You have to completely master your rationality. You may be in a situation where you think, okay, well, the science tells me this, but even in science, there are accidents, there are unintended consequences, there are things which can set you back. And the only thing that prevents you from dying here is your ability to control your panic.
But aren't you dangerously walking that line of just saying all fear equals horror and any movie
No,
with fear is horror?
not when you're on a planet that's 4 million miles away and takes you 4 years to get to and from.
I have to think about this. Um, well,
It's the
and
ice, it's the isolation that makes it different.
so are you psyched to see Send Help then?
I don't know about that movie.
Oh, the Sam Raimi Castaway movie that's coming out.
No, I don't. I'm not in the loop on that movie.
Well, when we're done with this, go check the trailer.
Oh, I will. I will. But
Um,
probably not because this is the kind of thing that scares the hell out of me. People were like, "Oh, did you go see Castaway?" Oh, hell no. No, I did not. I am not interested. The other kind of movie like this, which makes me crazy, and I just thought of a great example of this. This is definitely a horror movie that doesn't know it's a horror movie. It's the Harrison Ford movie, The Mosquito Coast.
well, that's an interesting choice too. I haven't seen that one in a while. I like that movie a lot.
Well, this is the kind of movie which works in the following way. A guy who's really got everything together and is rational and has, his life works. He decides he's going to go on this plan that seems a little off, We're going to
Mhm.
go to this part of the world and there's a lot of physical challenges and everything that can go wrong does wrong. And
Yeah,
gradually what you watch is a guy going completely stark raving bonkers.
right.
Yeah, no, I don't want
Yeah,
to
no,
see
that's
that.
a good one. I think that's a good one. I'm totally there with you.
That's a horror movie. And it's not just a horror movie from his perspective because he slowly goes crazy. It's a horror movie because holy crap, what happened to dad? What happened to my husband? How did this guy who has everything together go completely stark raving crazy?
Hmm.
And so they're horrified because this guy who's been this example in their lives, this guy who's provided and gotten things done and made things work, is just falling apart completely.
Hmm.
That's horrifying for everyone involved.
Right,
So I don't think every movie can be which involves fear is a horror movie.
right.
There has to be a magnitude. There has to be uh, possibly, and maybe not necessarily in every case, but I think one of the things that puts it in this category of movies which are horror but don't know they're horror is uh, really big, seemingly insurmountable obstacles, difficulties, technological challenges. That's one of the things that makes the Andromeda Strain a horror movie because you have all this sparkling new technology, including a facility that will destroy itself if it seems likely a whatever pathogen might escape.
Hmm.
And yet, that's not what solves the problem. It's human eyeball Mark 1.0, which solves the problem.
This has only happened one other time where you and I have like totally disagreed on something, but I'm going to have to dig in and disagree on The Martian because I think that horror has to be intangible and somewhat unknowable. And I think that's the element of The Martian is that it's very tangible and very knowable. So we are going to disagree. Can you believe it? That never, ever happens.
Well, I do think having some knowledge of practical science, I think it's definitely there. I think there's a giant fear of failure, even though you have that rationality. So I don't think we're going to come to terms on this, but I think it's good that we disagreed on this stuff. It's boring if we always agree on everything.
Well, we do always agree on everything. That's really funny.
Well, no, it's great that you're wrong here. So
So I'm going to throw a double at you again here because we're hitting themes and I'm more
yeah, let's do
interested
it.
in the themes than one of the, and it's interesting. I feel like I'm more looking towards the movies that walk the line and I want to tip them over.
Sure, sure.
And so one fundamental element that you see a lot, well, not a fundamental, but a fundamental trope of
Yes.
horror movies, of course, is the psycho, the psycho killer. Psycho. Another movie that was not called horror when
Nope.
it came out. What was it called? It was a thriller.
Yes.
Thriller becomes the acceptable term for decades for horror because
Yep.
horror is a bad word.
Yeah,
But
because horror assumes gothic monster movies.
right. And no one would argue now that Psycho isn't a horror movie, but it does bring the question, when are these Psycho movies horror? Like I would not argue, for example, for in a moment, that Dirty Harry was horror, even though it has a crazy psycho killer in it. But a couple that I would argue are horror. One is Frenzy, which got termed a thriller. It's Hitchcock's penultimate movie,
Yeah.
The Necktie Killer. And, I won't go into too much detail about it for no other reason than it's been a long time since I've seen it and I don't remember it well. And also, who wants to give too many spoilers? But that loss of control, it includes a loss of control of someone, of our main character who is, falsely accused of being the necktie killer. So he's
Right.
really out of control. There's this complete lack of control for your audience character, that adds on to the whole psycho type
Yeah.
character. I think the combination make it pretty classic horror and not a thriller. And then the other one, and this also comes down to control, because this control of, and this is even more so, the control of the sort of unknowable, where you're dealing with a crazy person, with a psycho, is The Vanishing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
That's
definitely a
horror.
horror movie,
That's
though.
a horror movie. Yeah. And that's another one that did not get tagged as a horror movie. And I think it's because people thought it was too good. It was borderline art house, you know? And
Well,
they
which
were,
version are you talking about? You're talking
oh, the
about
original,
the Dutch
the
version.
Dutch one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although the remake, the American remake, with,
Son,
what's his name? Jeff Bridges, I guess,
yeah.
was in it.
Yep.
Um,
Jeff Bridges and
it's
Sandra
not,
Bullock.
he wasn't bad. It
It's a
wasn't,
pretty good movie.
it was a
It
pretty
was my
good movie.
introduction to that movie, and then I saw the Dutch one later on. The Dutch one to me is much more of a horror movie. I think The Vanishing is more of a, I don't know. Anyway, the Dutch one kind of, I think the reason why it works better is in some European societies, the idea of civil society, of a government that works, of people who have kind of this peaceful existence that's not marred a lot by social violence. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden that's completely stripped away. And
Yeah.
that's interesting because it's going to relate to another example of what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is a much more kind of abstract version of that. And maybe I'll just talk about that now.
The
Uh,
Vanishing, I will say before we get off it completely, had a did something unique for my viewing. Usually, and I'm going to admit it. I admit it freely. I'm a dumb American. A lot of times, having to read subtitles, it distances me from the movie. Not always. A lot of times, the movie is so good, I just don't care. But sometimes, if it's not a really good movie, I feel a little distanced from it because I'm using another part of my brain.
well, don't
Uh, but The
yeah,
Vanishing, the the difference in language, something about it made it feel even more. I don't know. I was into it even more. It increased the dread for me. It made
yeah,
me feel me as an English speaker less less connected.
yeah. You don't have any idea what's going on, and to
Right.
see what's going on, you have to read the subtitles.
Yeah.
Let me warn you: do not see a movie in Finland because in Finland it will be in the original language, but you'll have Finnish, Swedish, and there's even another language. They have three lines of subtitles in every movie.
Oh my God.
I went and saw them, one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, and what I think is arguably one of his best was After Hours. Have you seen that movie?
No, I have not.
You definitely need to see that movie. Basically, it's the story. It's one of the guys from An American Werewolf in London. He plays a New Yorker who gets lost after hours in New York, and it's all about the eccentricity of living in New York. And it takes place from basically from dusk until dawn the next morning, and all these crazy things happen to him. as he's trying to find his way home. I
Mm.
think it's arguable you could call that the Odyssey, based on the
Uh-huh.
Odyssey. But it's kind of a movie like that. Yeah, the Vanishing is a great example of one that really fits in the category.
Yeah, it
That's a
really,
horror movie. It just
that's a
doesn't know
horror
it's a
movie.
horror movie.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one that does that for Americans, but at the most fundamental institutional level. And this is my background, but I'm just telling you here and now, All the President's Men is a horror movie.
That's so interesting you say that. You're going to be very interested in the next one on my list, which will flow in very easily now. See, this is great. We're getting into themes. So rather
Yep.
than going in a top list, you mention one and it brings up something I'm thinking about and vice versa.
Yep.
And I love this free-flowing conversation we're having.
Yep. We're in flow state on this one, that's for sure. So, All the President's Men, for those people who you don't know, is how it's a movie about how two reporters from the Washington Post, and yes, boys and girls, this is something that really happened, how they uncover not the burglary that Nixon did. They do find out about the burglary, but they also find out the fact that Epstein, uh, there is a massive cover up at the top levels in the White House to prevent people from knowing Richard Nixon ordered a burglary of of the Washington headquarters of the Democratic National Party. And it's a horror movie, and it takes place at the right time for it to be a horror movie. This one is really historically, contextually limited. And that is, in the 60s, especially the early 60s, everybody has this absolute confidence in the press, in all three branches of the government, unless, of course, you're black or homosexual or really a woman. But, all of the majority of society, white male society, and their children believe that government is good for you and that government's going to do nice things for you and government's going to get you out of very big difficulties like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mhm.
And slowly and gradually, you find that government at the very top level is absolutely fundamentally corrupt
Yeah.
and not there for you and there to harm you. And of course, the 70s are just full of this. And no matter what perspective you look at, no matter if you're going from the perspective of the two reporters who discovered this cover up and were led to it both by their good journalistic work and informants in this totally corrupt government, um, those people are horrified at what's happened. Nixon is horrified that he can't use the power of government to do whatever he wants
Right.
and that he gets caught at it. If you're thinking about a member of the general public here, they're horrified that all of this stuff is completely wrong. Now, by the time this movie comes out, which is 76 or 77, I think, uh, we already know all the details. Nixon has already had to resign, and it's been an ongoing process. You gradually begin to realize the government's not your friend in the 60s. That pushes up with the Vietnam War, and then Watergate makes you even less trustful of the government. And so this is a horror movie that isn't just a horror movie.
Yeah.
It's a complete degradation of the uh, I would say that this movie it's the pinnacle of the degradation of Americans' trust in their institutions. And that from the end of World War II, America saved democracy all over the world until really the beginning of starts with Vietnam. It starts, I think, with the civil rights movement, where people realize, hey, the governments around here have been used to oppress a large percentage of the population. And then it moves into Vietnam. And then the pinnacle of this is the fact that you cannot trust people who are supposed to have the absolute trust of the American people.
The
And
state as the existential threat, as the thing creating the existential, unknowable, untouchable, mysterious dread is
that's
the
right.
state.
And that's a reflection on the general public too,
Hmm.
because it's the general public who elects these people.
which horror always is. As we talked about when we talked at some length about horror and immigration and the connection,
Yeah,
our views over the years. Horror reflects what we're afraid of, not just in general, but particularly at that
very
time.
specifically. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And it also reflects what individuals fear at that point in time.
Mhm.
And so this is a horror movie. This is unequivocally a horror movie.
It's so interesting that you picked this one because I found myself looking in the 70s too, and I finally got around to seeing a movie that I should have seen decades ago, and I never did. And it's come up, I think, in discussion, and I've been like, believe it or not, I haven't seen it. And you're like, oh my God, what the hell is the matter with you? But I just finally saw The Conversation. And
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the conversation, I think there is a strong argument.
Yes.
This is my other sketchy one. This is my other sketchy one. But you get into, I mean, you've got some of the visuals of horror, not a lot, but you get them very clearly towards the end. But you also have the term that we start hearing more and more and more. That's now become a completely standard term, and that's psychological horror,
Yes.
which is particular. It's different.
Yeah.
All horror is psychological, but when you talk about psychological horror, you're talking about something like Black Swan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you have an element of that in the conversation where there is this whole paranoia of listening to and being listened to, and am I being listened to, and can I, I can't trust my girlfriend because
Yeah.
she asks too many questions, and with it's it's very Hitchcockian in the way it plays out, but I think I know. Are you allowed to refer to one great director as being influenced by another great director? Um,
Of
I
course you are
I think so. Yeah.
because of what Picasso said. Picasso said amateurs borrow, artists steal.
There you go. There you go. But anyways, I think the conversation and just I may not feel that way if it weren't Gene Hackman doing such an incredible Gene Hackman job in that movie.
Yeah.
But again, I tend to avoid giving these movies away, but it is all about surveillance culture. It's all
Yep.
about not the state. It's more distributed than that. It's that anybody could be listening for any reason, especially if you anger or anybody in power. There's the corporate element to it.
Yeah. Let's
Um,
let's let's talk about your phone,
right.
which is
It's
listening to you.
it's listening to you. It's a corporation listening to you.
Yes, it's all private industry.
Yeah.
What I think is great is people got all up in arms about TikTok. TikTok is Chinese spying. Um, yeah, and so is Facebook, and
Yeah.
so is Twitter. And so, so you don't care if technology uh, surveils you constantly 24 hours, as long as you can get that good Groupon
Right.
coupon, right? Or as long as you can get a good deal at the DSW shoe warehouse. You don't care about that,
Hmm.
but you worry about Chinese gathering data on you. So it's okay for private businesses to do this to you, but not the government.
Right. And I should say, when I say corporate in this one, I'm not actually talking about corporations so much as I'm talking about powerful individuals.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree.
But
But
still, it works.
it's the same thing.
Yeah,
That
it's the
power
same thing.
comes quite a bit from one, gathering information on an unknown basis, and two, money.
Yeah, yeah,
And what's interesting to me that we talk about this is I recently saw a clip by a former member of the Central Intelligence Agency and he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, your smart TV, the CIA can turn it on and listen to your conversation anytime they want."
yep, absolutely. Well,
Which is
and
why,
obviously, it's got to be listening for you to, Siri's listening, or she wouldn't hear you say Siri,
right?
right?
That's why I try not to turn on voice commands on my phone.
Yeah,
So, but these movies are horror movies. There's there's no doubt that both of those movies are about horror.
yeah,
And Again, I don't think what we're talking about here is fear of the surveillance state. I think what we're talking about is this existential dread that this is completely out of our control.
Yes, yes, and it's somewhat unknowable. It's lurking. You don't know. It's like the supernatural. It's like the ghost. It's like it
It's
could be right in the next room and you
right.
don't know. You watch him tear apart his room at the end of the movie looking for the
Yeah.
bug, just
Looking for
destroy it because you don't know. And even then, he can't find it.
right, right. Even then, there's this question about how do you fix this? How do you get away with it?
Yeah, yeah. And how do
Um,
you stop it?
I got two more I want to talk about.
I got two more too. Perfect.
Okay. Um, the first one I'm going to talk about is really, really, really relevant. And this is definitely not considered a horror movie, but once you start putting your once you start seeing the movie in the perspective of the main character, it is a horror movie. And that's The Manchurian Candidate.
The Manchurian Candidate. I can see that. Sure.
That's a horror movie. And so just to give people kind of as much as possible a spoiler-free synopsis of this movie is there's a man who is hailed as a Medal of Honor winner, having done some incredible act of bravery during the Korean War. And it turns out all of that is false. He's really a sleeper agent for the Russians and the Chinese. And he doesn't know he's a sleeper agent. Turns out some people very close to him have purposely turned him into a sleeper agent to gain power over the United States government.
It's very close to him.
Yes, yes. I would argue far too close to him in this
Yeah,
situation. But
almost unbelievably so, but that's
but
we're
but
getting too
this is
close.
a classic 1960s spy movie
Yeah.
where someone very important turns out to be another sleeper agent who might control the entire government.
I had a very
And
hard time. I recently on my Substack, which is
yeah.
elections focused, I put a list of movies that election officials should watch, and I put this on there, and I started trying to just create a blurb. I didn't want to take too much time to say something about this movie that wasn't a spoiler,
Yeah.
something, and I struggled, and so I said virtually nothing.
Yeah.
But it's a great movie.
But now I have to tell you, I do not like, and I think the remake
Oh, pff,
is a failure. The
pish
one with,
tosh.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said pish tosh.
Yeah, it's terrible. The remake, and how do you have a terrible movie with Denzel Washington and Meryl Streep in it? But you do. It's a terrible movie.
It is.
Uh, but the one you want to see is the original with Frank Sinatra and Lawrence. What's his last name? Can't think of
Oh, the guy
the main character.
who was in that Star Trek episode.
Oh, I'm going to look up his
I
name.
can't think of his name.
But
As I mentioned Star Trek,
and
I haven't
and
done
of
that.
course, Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, whose name is escaping me again. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Old Guy Puzzle
All I can think
podcast.
of is Tony Curtis.
No,
That's the only name I can think of.
yeah, right. Well, it was his wife, Janet Leigh.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, Janet Leigh, based on a book, but uh, why don't we have something about
And you know what? This isn't, I was thinking this is a movie that could have gone on our movies you should never remake list, but I'm going to stop that. I'm going to
Oh,
turn
this movie
around and
needs
say,
to be
a
remade.
good remake could have been done. It's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. This movie needs to be remade. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, so here's the main cast. This is the one you want to see. It's from 1962. It's Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey, Janet Leigh, Angela Lansbury. This is a brilliant movie. A brilliant movie.
If you see
And
one Angela Lansbury thing, this is the one.
yeah, oh, that's exactly right. That or Gaslight.
Oh, right.
Which brings
Right.
me to we're going to talk about Gaslight too. So I don't have two, I have three more. And I'll get
Okay.
quickly about this. But here's the point. This guy's life is not in his control, not at any point at all,
Right.
except the end of the movie. And the revelation that his life has never been his own throughout most of his adult life is a sign of existential horror.
Yeah.
This is Everything I think is true. I mean, at some point, they use him to kill the woman that he loves. And so he completely falls apart at the end of this movie. And that revelation, that catharsis, leads him to do something at the very end of the movie, which is equally shocking. This is a terrific movie, and it is your classic Cold War spy thriller, but it's not a spy movie. It's a horror film.
Yeah.
This
No, I
guy
haven't seen it.
has found out his entire life is not what he thinks he is, and he has had zero control over it. Nothing he's done, he's succeeded at. Even the job he ends up getting after the war, he had no real hand in. His entire life was never his once he got back from the Korean War. And he finds out that he's done some horrible things and that the people manipulating him are planning even more horrible things. And the whole movie becomes a question of what do you do once you find this out? This is a horror movie. If
Mhm.
you found out your entire life was that you thought was orderly and uh, set in a certain way by a certain number of events and a certain group of people which helped influence you, and you found that all that was total bullshit, you would be horrified too.
Yeah.
So you've got to see this movie. This is a modern classic, and once you see it, you will begin to doubt your own reality, especially your own current political reality.
So I've just got two more, and they're two easy ones.
Okay.
I'll do them one at a time, but they would have been my first ones, I think.
Yeah.
But we started following themes and things, so I just sort of went with that. But I'll give you the absolute easiest one first, and then I'll save the second easiest one for my last one. But this just comes right out of this is the other poster child for, come on, it's a horror movie, but we're not allowed to say horror in the 60s because horror's a bad word. And that's 2001.
Oh yeah.
It's
This
sci-fi
is
horror. It's
this
sci-fi
is
horror in all
definitely,
kinds of ways.
yeah, in many, many ways, this is a great example. You got
Yeah.
fear of technology run amok. You have, because of that, you also have fear of human nature.
Hmm.
Because
You
I mean,
have
that's why Hal turns evil is because, humans programmed him in a way that was terrible.
Yeah, but we don't know that in
I know.
2001, and I think it works to its advantage. I think it's a very interesting in 2010, and I think I'm glad they have it there, and it's a big, big part of 2010
Oh, I
that we
definitely, yeah,
get
I
this
agree
revelation.
completely.
But in 2001, I think it's very important that we don't. I think it's very important that this is just this thing deciding that we're in its way.
Yep.
And making that a pure decision and not one that we somehow screw up and forced on it, I think increases the dread because I
Yeah.
think the
Oh,
idea
yeah.
that that could happen. And then, of course, it invents unique elements of visual horror at the end in the room. What the hell is all that? And the sounds, the that this movie is a horror, is sci-fi horror before we were allowed to say that.
No, this is a great example of it, and it shows the beauty of. Oh, and I'm going to tell you there. I mean, there are the same themes in this movie as there are in The Shining. It's just that in one is technology, and the other it's ghosts.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. It's technology which is so far advanced that it becomes supernatural.
Yeah.
So there's a direct thread here between 2001 and The Shining. By the way, I went and saw The Shining in IMAX. If you get a chance to do that, it's glorious.
It was good. I wanted to ask you
Oh
about
my
that.
God, it's amazing. But you get to see details in that movie that you would never see otherwise. There are little Easter eggs that if you went to see this movie at the theater in 1980 when it came out, you never would have seen, but they're really there.
That's funny.
Like, it's kind of crazy. In the hallway where Dick Halloran gets axed, there are little symbols on the columns in that room that the symbols on the column change at the point where Jack Nicholson jumps out and hits him in the chest with the axe.
Really?
Yeah, so there's a repetition of symbols, and at that spot, it basically says X marked the spot. This is where Dick Halloran's going to get killed.
Oh, cool. That's very
And so, this is Kubrick. We're talking about eyes for
yeah.
detail. That's
Yeah.
what there is. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, another one you could throw his way is the first half of Full Metal Jacket. It's
Oh
another one.
man.
So he's full of them.
Well, I have to tell you, I think that's another example of kind of the unintended consequences of horror. That there's a horror element to that first part of the movie because what you're doing is you're erasing any kind of social compunction not to commit violence. The
Humanity. You're erasing humanity. It's, yeah.
well, I think we could get into a debate about that because I think there are people who would argue that you are
Unleashing humanity.
that what you're doing is training people to use their most basic sense of humanity, which is survival.
Ah,
But anyway, that's not really a conversation for this movie. I think it's the fact that when you're training Marines to be killers, and make no mistake, that's exactly what Marine boot camp is for.
right,
You don't expect those instincts to be turned against other Marines.
right.
And I think that's kind of one of the fundamental messages of that movie is that if you're going to engage in training these people to murder, don't be surprised when they murder your own.
Yeah. If you're going to break people down to their core so you can build them back up in your image, don't be surprised if you break one down and you just break them.
And it goes wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that the first part is a metaphor for the second part, and a metaphor for the whole war in Vietnam is that at the beginning you think it makes sense. But we're going to go in, we're going to stop communism, and we've done this for one great existential threat to America, I mean, to civilization, and that's the Nazis. And now, of course, it's exactly the same thing here. So it's at the beginning, it's very regimented, and you have to follow the rules, and then you realize there are unintended consequences of your rules, and it ends up murdering the drill sergeant, and it starts regimented and goes crazy, and then you continue that in part two and get crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier,
No,
and nothing.
you're going to have to double up your last two because after this conversation we just had, I have to tell you my last one.
Okay,
We can't.
I've forgotten the one that came to me, so I've just got one more.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, and this one I think is another easy one, and we're going to double up on Coppola, and that's Apocalypse Now.
Oh yeah, I love that movie so much.
That's a
I love
horror
that
movie.
movie so much. That came out in '79 for one of my big projects as a senior in English classes. I did a presentation on Heart of Darkness and read Heart of Darkness. That
Mm.
is such a great book. And one of the best lines in that book is, "You don't know what evil you can do until you realize that you could put another man's head on a pole and carry it around." So go ahead. Yeah, Apocalypse Now is definitely a horror movie, and it's one of those horror movies you know, uh, which involves uh, facing your own existential dread.
Yeah.
It involves with stripping away all these things you think make sense. None of them make sense. It's all crazy. Everything's crazy. There is no anchor in morality or ethics or even
Right.
humanity.
And just the metaphor going deeper and deeper, deeper
Yeah.
into the jungle. That's a tone movie for you, though. It's one of your tone movies.
I don't know if it is. I mean, I think tone is an element of it, but in a in a tone film, that's the main purpose. And I don't think that's the main purpose of Apocalypse Now.
No, no, it's an element to it. Like we were
Yeah.
saying, it's one of
Yeah.
the many spices in the stew.
It's definitely part of it, but the kind of movie I'm talking about is a movie which that's the main point is to establish this tone,
Ah,
which does that extremely well because it's really the plot of it is just kind of a thin thing, and the tone is the real meat of the movie.
right.
God, I love that movie so much. It was so good.
It was.
All right, I'm going to give you my last one.
Okay.
My last one is kind of an obscure movie. Not many people saw it. It's done by Gus Van Sant. It's called Elephant.
Have not seen it, although funny, Gus Van Sant, who did the scene for scene remake of Psycho.
Right.
He's a funny one to pick. But
Gus
yeah,
Van
tell me
Sant.
about it.
The movie Elephant is the telling of the story of Columbine, but in a
Oh,
fictional sense.
yikes.
And
Yeah.
what you find here is not how different the two killers were to their peers, but how similar they were.
Hmm.
And the movie is done from several different angles of the same event. Like there's one kid that knows what's going to happen, and he tries instead of going to school that day, he asks he asks his dad to take him to school, but he's ditched school and he's waiting out front and he's going, "Don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. Something terrible is going to happen. Don't go in, don't go in." He doesn't go to the police. He goes to tell people in front of the school, "Don't go in. It's going to be terrible."
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, they're going to follow the killers at the end. But what happens is you see several different versions of the same event from different points of view. And they cover all kinds of different people, people who got away, people who were brutally murdered just because they happened to be in the same room, people that the two killers were going after. This is a horror movie involving everyone. Everyone here is in a literal hell, whether it's hell because you're awkward and can't get along with anyone else in society, or hell because you have an unrequited love for someone who doesn't even know you exist, or hell because you're bullied, or hell because you're just twisted and want to kill people. Everyone in this movie is in a terrible, existential, difficult set of circumstances, and some of them behave in good ways and some of them behave in bad ways, but this is a horror movie from anyone who's involved. It's a horror movie because of the trauma that people who committed all these murders went through and what got them there. That is not to excuse what they did, because the fact is, what this movie shows is that the vast majority of people get through these kinds of existential dread, terrible, horrible situations where they're literally feeling like they're in hell in a useful way to society.
Hmm.
And it does not shy away from saying these were bad human beings, regardless of their circumstances.
Uh,
But it's sympathetic to everyone involved, teachers, students, parents, and the killers.
yeah.
But everybody is just in a terrible place.
Yeah.
And, I have to have my Buffy reference. Um,
Well, we already
Buffy,
had a Star Trek reference, so it's only
yeah,
fair.
Buffy really called this. The entire point of Buffy is that everyone in high school is in hell, and everybody in high school pretty much is going through this on their own.
Hmm.
But Gus Van Sant takes it to a real horror. This is a horror movie.
Hmm.
It's a horror movie because society has institutions have failed everyone here. It's a horror movie because the kids who did all these murders had no way to process trauma. It's a horror movie because parents and teachers who saw this coming did nothing about it. And it's a stylized fictional version of this, but it really shows in the late 1990s, the late 20th century, just how off the rails American society is. And it's a brilliant movie, and nobody's seen it. And I had to watch it on YouTube for free
Hmm.
because this is not, it's very difficult to find anywhere. And part of the reason why is because it treats everyone with some kind of sympathy, including the killers.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's a tough one. Uh,
but it is a horror film. This is an absolute horror film because everyone here is both guilty and not guilty, manipulated and manipulating, and it's a straight up horror movie.
it's interesting. You make me think of something else that we didn't even get into.
Yeah.
And that's because what you're describing sounds like it's almost one step away of being a true crime type
And
type
that's
thing.
that's
And,
how it was marketed. That's how it was classified. It's all wrong. It's
and
all wrong.
well, true crime, a lot of true crime, you could also argue could be a subset of horror. Not all of it, but a lot of it,
Oh no, I
depending
agree
on how
too.
it's done.
Especially when you're talking about serial killers.
Yeah, yeah. But
The thing about serial killers is, to give you an example with was Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper, I think he's still alive. He's got to be in his 90s by now.
mhm.
He lived in Santa Cruz, California, and he used to pick up hitchhikers and brutally murder them. But And he killed his grandparents, but he went to a mental institution. And this was when he was much younger. And he basically completely bamboozled the psychiatrists
Huh.
who were treating him. Basically fooled them and said, hey, you know what? Guess what? I'm a complete psycho, but I'm cured.
Mm.
And so they released him back into the wild, and he immediately started killing again. And the thing about it is, and you see this if you've seen the David Fincher series Manhunter, he's this completely affable, very, very smart, very, very charming person. And once you see him in real life and see interviews with him, you can completely understand why somebody would take a ride from him.
Hmm.
And what's interesting here is this is a quote, a direct quote from him in an interview. He said, "Look, people would see me on the outside, and you know I would be charming and talk to them and be nice, and I would talk to a girl and I would be talking to her, and I'd be thinking, wow, it'd be really great to take her out on a date and have fun time with her. But then part of my brain was going, huh, I wonder what her head would look like on a pole." And that what makes serial killers horror is you have no idea who they are out there.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
operating in real life, in real society, sometimes awkwardly, but quite often in a very charming and disarming way. And they are brutal, straight up killers who don't think humans are the same thing that they are. And that's really the horror thing about true crime is, who knows who, they say this, oh, the
Yeah.
BTK killer, he was a deacon in his church. Yes, who was tying people up, torturing them in front of their loved ones, and then killing everyone.
Right. Right.
So that's what makes
Yeah.
true crime horrible. All
It
right, you got
is.
one
And
more?
I don't think it all is, but I think, some of it's Dirty Harry, which I don't think is horror, but some of it's Frenzy, which I think is. And
Yep, I agree.
your mileage may vary, obviously, but yeah, no, that's all I got.
Well, I think we covered this pretty well, concerning the fact that you and I were going at the beginning. We're thinking, can we do this?
Yeah, I know, right? We could
Is
go
this
on
a thing that
forever.
works? But I think I would encourage other people to look at movies the same way.
Hmm.
Look at a movie you don't think is a horror movie and say, could this be really a horror movie? Because I guarantee you there are filmmakers out there that are doing just that. They're saying, okay, let's make this movie, but it's really a horror movie.
Embrace the term. Don't shy away from it. It's got a lot of good, it's got a good pedigree.
All right, guys, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it.
All right, here next time, or see you next time, or talk to you next time. Well, there will be a next time. Our theme music is by Christopher Piatek.